Hello, everybody, and welcome once again to Teachers in the Dungeon. My name is Dan. I am normally here with Tom. Actually, I should say Tom is normally here with me. He's sort of the first among equals when it comes to putting this whole thing together, but he unfortunately is a little bit under the weather on our recording date, so I just told him to relax, rest, and I would handle this one. So I guess that means I kind of have carte blanche, talk about whatever I want. And this is generally this is the time of the year where all of our best plans kind of come crashing down. We had several different series that we're working on. We were so disciplined, had them all through the summer. And now that the school year has hit us like a truck, we're kind of having to scramble. So we will should be back on track next week. But in the meantime, I kind of thought through, there was something I was particularly interested in looking at, and hopefully it'll resonate with the rest of you. So I was wondering, are any of you scared of failing in front of people? Being thought of as knowledgeable, but then that one person comes out of nowhere and blows a mile-wide hole through your argument or your credentials or your facade. It can happen in any situation, really. It's happening to me right now in teaching, actually. I've got a new student teacher. He's an awesome kid. My students are gonna love him for all the right reasons. And I'm looking forward to his experience. I'm looking forward to helping him. About a week ago, right when we were getting started, another teacher came up and said, "Oh, you are so lucky to be working with Mr. Ream. You are going to have a great semester and you're going to learn so much." And that was a very nice compliment to get. It was really sweet, made me feel good for a second. And then the very next thing that popped into my head was, yeah, but what if he doesn't think it's a great experience? What if he looks at what I'm doing and he's kind of like, anybody could do that. I mean, he didn't even have a bell ringer. So that kind of thought is, as you've already deduced, imposter syndrome. So this is a psychological pattern in which people doubt their accomplishments and have a persistent, often internalized fear of being exposed as a fraud. And today I wanted to talk about that in the realm of D&D, specifically when a DM himself or herself is afflicted with imposter syndrome. Now, as you could probably guess by the way we're going with this, I certainly suffer from this myself, but hopefully we can find some universally applicable ideas that will emerge as we kind of go through and discuss this. So to start with, just to give you a little bit of background of my own experience, I've been DMing for about 5 or 6 years now, almost from the start of my playing. I really didn't wait very long to jump in. Tom started off our teachers group, as we've said many times. He ran the first session. It was first story arc, probably only 4 or 5 sessions, really. And I don't really know exactly why I wanted to jump in so quick. I think I like the element of storytelling. That seemed fun to me. So I said, if you want, I will take a turn and then we can come back to you. And Tom was great with that. Gave him a little bit of a break. So I did. I simply created a homebrew and threw it down there in front of the players. I didn't really do any of the prep that you're supposed to do. I didn't watch Critical Role. I didn't study Matt Mercer. I didn't do Google searches on 10 tips to be a great DM. I just did it. And it was a very kind and forgiving group. And even though a couple of them had significant experience with D&D, they were very gracious and did not bring my many mistakes to my attention. So I felt good about it overall. Now I'm to the point now where I DM part-time or full-time for 4 separate groups, 3 of the 4 with homebrew adventures. It is a lot of fun and I enjoy the creative outlet, but there is a creeping suspicion that not all is well. I still have those thoughts creeping in when I don't want them. So the evidence that I present before you, perhaps some of you who have DM'd maybe can identify with that just a little bit. So first up, that deflated feeling after a session that seems detached from actual events. Just a nagging feeling that really wasn't very good. Realizing that there are some DM things I'm just not very good at or that I neglect. I personally am, I suppose, a renegade or a heretic in that backstory for my own characters doesn't mean much. I kind of like to just jump in and watch the character develop through the adventure itself. That is not what a lot of people want. And I tend not to remember to ask for backstory, or when I do get the backstories, I'm not very good at incorporating them. They kind of fall by the wayside. So there's that as well. I have a tendency to disbelieve players when they tell me they had fun. I appreciate it, but sometimes I think, well, maybe you're just saying that. And finally, I do kind of find myself occasionally with certain players sort of steeling myself, preparing myself for the, well, it's a lot of fun, really, but I've just gotten too busy to keep playing speech that I fear is coming. So, to be honest, it goes a lot farther than that. One little event that happened to me recently, there was a session that really did feel very mid. I contacted the player that appeared to, this was online, by the way. I contacted later the player that appeared to be the most checked out just to see if everything was okay. And his immediate response, he meant well. He truly did. But I translated his response as, yeah, I didn't like the session. We just wandered around and found stuff all night. You should really try DMing like blank. Ouch. Particularly since he helpfully provided YouTube links for me to watch what he was talking about. I was a little knocked off kilter because I had specifically designed that session trying to predict what I thought he would like as a character and as a player. So that hit pretty close to the bullseye of my self-confidence. So, and yeah, I mean, he's not wrong. I could probably learn a thing or two from Brendan Lee Mulligan, but probably not by the next session. So that kind of hurt. So that's kind of the heart of what made me want to kind of talk about this, is I thought, I know I've seen the memes about the forever DM and the emotional letdown after every single session. So I thought it's not just me. It must be out there. And it is. You know, poking around, doing a little bit of, I guess you could call Google research, either into actual articles or onto, various chats on Reddit or D&D Beyond, whatever. I did find that there is a definite pattern. People definitely recognize it. And this isn't anything earth-shaking, but it does appear that most of the anxiety that crops up surrounding sort of an imposter syndrome feeling is either right before the session or right after. In the midst of it, maybe it's there, but I do kind of feel like in the moment, as a DM, you're distracted enough by everything else. You don't really have time to decide if you're being an imposter or not. So that could be wrong. I'm sure there are times in the midst of sessions where people suddenly get that sinking feeling, but I think it's particularly acute either before or after. So let's take a look at that just a little bit and kind of see what other people out there think and feel about this. So I think the before the session one is probably the most understandable. I was reading a couple of different commentaries and articles, and they likened it to just before you have to give a speech. That is something that terrifies almost everybody, and it's just that panic of, did I prepare everything? Do I have everything I need? What's going to happen when I get up there and I've forgotten my clicker, or I've forgotten half my notes, or whatever it is? So that seems I don't want to say normal, but completely understandable, well in line with other activities where individuals find themselves sort of center stage, whether they want to be or not. I think that gets wrapped up in the fear of trying new things, particularly something like DMing. So particularly when you've got that Matt Mercer effect out there that everybody talks about. And from what I understand from Matt Mercer, I imagine he is horrified that his name is attached to something like that, because he seems like just a very kind-hearted man. Last thing he wants is people feeling bad on his account. But it is interesting, though, that the post-session anxiety really does seems to be the one that gets people. I did find this quote that said, "I had players tell me that they had the best session of their lives, but I went home and I lost sleep thinking about all the mistakes I had made and how I didn't do everything I could to provide the best experience for all players." And to that, I can only say same. It doesn't always really matter how the session actually went. I'm always thinking afterward, shoot, here's this whole paragraph of really cool lore that would have been perfectly inserted in this situation, or dang it, I forgot the accent I was supposed to do for that particular character. That accent started, I don't know, it started Russian and ended up Irish, like they always do. That sort of thing just kind of piles into your head. So I think the post-session anxiety, in a way, is probably worse, perhaps even more damaging for people than the lead up to it. And I think it is worse, and I read this a couple different places. Online, it's kind of a rule of thumb. I think online makes everything worse in some ways. And again, it's a pretty obvious sort of sociological or psychological thing when you think about it. Most communication is nonverbal. If you're online with somebody, you're cutting most of that out. And I know I've experienced that myself, and it is my online sessions where I feel the least satisfied at their conclusion as a DM. And I think it really is due to the fact that the communication is just really stilted. There's enough you can't see people's faces, you can't see people getting ready to talk. There's a slight delay as the voices go back and forth on Discord or Roll20 or whatever it is that you're using. And for me, I hate those pauses, so I'll try to jump in with stuff. And half the time I'm cutting somebody off because they were just gathering their thoughts. And if I could have seen them, I would have known that. But even with the video, that's not always the greatest thing. So I think that's part of it. I think D&D is so much centered around conversation and communication, obviously, that when that's interrupted or sort of compromised, the whole game can suffer. But that's not usually what I'm thinking. I'm thinking I screwed up as a DM. And it seems like a lot of people like that are out there are like that. So one other thing, this is a little bit tangential, but not really. The other thing that came up a lot in some of the posts I was reading and some of the articles was a question for the ages. So I'll put it to you, dear audience. What do you think? Do individuals experience imposter syndrome because of the nature of DMing? Or are the people who step up to DM just naturally prone to imposter syndrome? Sort of a chicken or the egg type of a question. So meanwhile, that's enough whining on my part. It's a wonderful game. I have wonderful friends. I don't have any players that are actively trying to undermine me or anything like that. So it's just a reality of DMing. At least it appears to be for many people. So let's try to fix the problem. What is there out there to help people with this kind of, because it is unpleasant and it probably does stop people from not only enjoying the game as much as they could, but maybe stops them from participating even. So what can we do? What can DMs do to make the situation better for themselves? What can people do to help them? I've got quite a few things that I found online that I think are pretty useful. So, first thing actually is a bit of a reality check, which, again, not super pleasant, but I think I need to throw it out there. It appears that it may be more realistic to manage imposter syndrome as a DM rather than cure or defeat it for all time. If you're prone to it, it's gonna be there. You have to learn how to deal with it. And connected to that, I do think that recognizing the problem is half the battle. Realizing that this is a narrative that you are creating that is contrary to reality in all likelihood. You're not an imposter. You are doing a good job, but circumstances are kind of leading you down a path that is not altogether pleasant. So just to kind of, again, take a little bit of a tangent, I did get permission from my daughter to share this. She is in her mid-20s. She has struggled with some pretty severe mental health issues through her life. And she has made a lot of progress, particularly in the last couple of years. And a lot of what she told me about the method that she's been taught, it seems like that has some resonance just in general for DMs and anybody really that struggles with imposter syndrome. The actual program is called DBT, or dialectical behavioral therapy. There's also cognitive behavioral therapy, and she has found that the DBT has been quite useful in dealing with intrusive thoughts, which I think this kind of imposter syndrome really kind of falls under the intrusive thoughts label. So there's a couple things that really I'm obviously easier said than done, but some simple concrete things that can help make the situation better. And I do think recognizing the problem is half the battle, as we already said. And I think another thing that's obvious, but it's not so obvious when you're in the moment, is don't assume thoughts and feelings your players almost certainly don't have. And connected to that was another quote that I found on a message board. I think it was D&D Beyond. And this person said, one thing I think to remember when you feel like you're not doing it perfectly is that your players know far less about what you're doing wrong than you do. And I think that's pretty wise. I know as a player, I can't think of a time where I sat there and thought, oh, DM just screwed up. That's not the way my mind is working. I am far too consumed with my own plotting and character creating and role playing and all that to even give a thought for the other side of the screen. And I do think most players are like that. And to the extent that I do, because I've been on the other side of the screen, I'm rooting for them. I want the DM to do well. I want them to feel like they've had a good time as well. And I've got to remember my players are like that too. A couple other things you can do your homework. It's much easier to feel bad about a session if you honestly didn't prepare and just had to wing it. I get it. Sometimes that happens, and some people are good at that. Some people are not. I just know that most of the time when I prepare, it just goes better. Kind of obvious, but I think it bears repeating. And I think, again, I apologize for ripping off a phrase that may also raise some hackles politically, but I think a quick thing to tell yourself is facts, not feelings. Fact is, as a DM, you probably have prepared. These people are your friends. These people want to have a good time. And nobody is expecting every session to outshine Critical Role. And I saw that again and again and again. And several people mentioned the same kind of thing, which is, look, Critical Role, all of those folks, they are professional voice actors, obviously. They have had hours and hours and hours to prepare for this. This is their job. This is not just something they're doing because it's really fun and they want to hang out with friends. Although that is true for them, I think that's what makes that show kind of special. And finally, this was the thing I really wasn't aware of. I mean, I guess I would have been if I'd thought about it, but that is a show with a staff, and the staff helps helps the DM, helps everybody to make it as polished and perfect as possible. So we, as DMs, need to cut ourselves some slack. Another thing to remember is you have taken a role as a DM that probably no one else at the table wants, and they're grateful to you for that, if for nothing else. Now, I do understand there are toxic players out there. They're thoughtless players. There are unappreciative players. But that's on them. That is not on you. And I think, that does set up a whole other set of rather difficult questions or things to discuss. Do you just need to tell that person, please don't come to my table anymore? Maybe you give them a chance first. Hey, I need you to be a little more positive if you're going to play at my table. Sorry if it doesn't work for you. I wish you well. If you want a letter of recommendation, I'll try to get you in at another table, but this isn't working. That's tough, but I think sometimes that does have to be said. Now, this is kind of where we come back to some of the things that my daughter's methods, I think, echo. And I saw this a lot online as well. I think just breathing exercises, distraction exercises, when you feel those thoughts come in, take note. Are you tired? Are you hungry? What is triggering you to go down that negative path? And then take steps to eliminate those triggers if possible. And then also come up with those other activities, a distraction activity, a breathing exercise that might help you. Connected to that, I think after every session, if this is something that, probably a DM should be doing this anyway. After the session, go over the facts of the session. Think about everything that happened, jot it down, keep a journal, and consider the feedback you did receive. And not just, oh, that was awesome, I really like that, but just kind of look at the way the players are interacting. Are they laughing? Are they bantering? Are they enjoying themselves? And this seems kind of basic, but I think it's valid. Do they keep coming back? If you have good attendance, you're doing something right. These people have other things they can do with 3 hours. They, particularly online, they can probably find somebody else. So you are succeeding with them, and you are because they've stuck around. Now, this is hard for me, but I think it's also worthwhile finding a time to ask each of your players if they're having fun. And that ties into just general good DM prep, is asking them, what do they want more of? What do they want less of? Now, that is a little risky because they might want more of something that you feel that's just not your strong suit. But I think it bears, I think it's worth asking the questions anyway. And one last thing, if you are a player, you've never DM'd, but you're a player, you love the game, you all know this, but I'm going to tell you anyway. Be gentle. Be aware of how, from the DM's perspective, you really do feel like you've got a spotlight on you. You're on a tightrope, and you got to make every step just right. So treat your DM with kindness. And I would say try to get in the habit of giving some good feedback to your DMs sometime after the session. I'm not as good at this as I should be, but I do try to remember to just send a quick text or something afterward. And it's fine to say, great session, loved it, but it's even better if you can pick one specific thing that you really enjoyed. That matters. A good compliment like that will stick with your DM. It doesn't cost you anything to do, and it is worth a ton. So it's definitely worth doing. And connected to that, if there is something that really does bother you or you really didn't have fun with, you can tell your DM that. It's kind of a cliche, but make it a compliment sandwich. Start out with, hey, great session. I really liked the voice you used for the goblin. That really kind of that kind of grabbed me. I really wanted to know more about that, or I'm really, really excited to find out what's behind the last couple doors of the dungeon. I just got a feeling. Then you can move on to, hey, if it's not too much trouble, or have you thought about, or, there's this character, this NPC that we all really loved. We haven't seen him for a while. Do you think they'll show up again? There's ways to do this that can nudge your DM in the right direction without without triggering imposter syndrome. So I realized I got to the end of this and it probably sounded a bit preachy. So if that's the case, I really do apologize. I didn't intend it that way. I just thought this was kind of an interesting topic. And when you look around on, as I said, on message boards or wherever, I don't think there's a single DM that will say, I'm never worried about that. No. They'll probably come out just to prove me a liar, but I think almost every DM runs across imposter syndrome now and again. So hopefully it's worthwhile to take a look at ways to fix it, mitigate it, and as a player, maybe encourage your DM so that it doesn't occur quite so frequently. All right. So that's all I've got for you folks for this week. I hope that everyone is adjusting to some nice fall weather. Beautiful here where I'm recording today. And on behalf of Tom, keep rolling those 20s, and I'll simply add, DMs, keep doing what you're doing. You are loved. You are appreciated. And players, I know that you feel that way. Just take a minute to express it. All right. Till next time, folks.